Explanation of the research study, generalization between motor and declarative memory sequences. Overview and background. This scientific paper reports on a conceptual replication study investigating whether motor and declarative memory systems can share information across domains. The research was conducted by Sophie Thong and colleagues at Monash University in Australia and published in iScience in August 2026. The study attempts to replicate and verify previous findings by Moshe and Roberts in 2016 that suggested memory systems traditionally thought to be distinct might actually interact and transfer information when they share similar structural features. Theoretical context. Traditionally, psychologists and neuroscientists have viewed motor procedural memory and declarative memory as separate systems. Motor memory involves learning skills and actions, like riding a bicycle or typing, while declarative memory involves facts and events, like remembering a shopping list or a personal experience. These systems were thought to operate through different brain mechanisms and neural networks. However, emerging research has challenged this strict division. Studies have shown that learning ordered sequences of actions and events may engage overlapping neural networks, particularly in the hippocampus. This suggests that ordinal information, the order of items in a sequence, might be processed similarly across different types of memories. The concept of generalization proposes that when you learn one type of sequence, that structural knowledge can be transferred to help you learn another sequence with the same underlying pattern, even if the content is completely different. The original study by Moshe and Roberts in 2016. The study being replicated found striking evidence that learning a word list and learning a motor sequence could influence each other when both shared the same ordinal structure. For example, if you learned a word list with a particular pattern and then practiced a motor task with the same underlying pattern, your motor learning would improve. This effect worked in both directions. Motor learning could also improve word list recall. This was considered remarkable because it suggested that abstract structural information could be extracted from one experience and applied to an entirely different type of learning. The current replication study. Methodology. The researchers recruited 125 healthy right-handed adults, average age 23.65 years, and randomly assigned them to 4 experimental groups. Each participant completed both a word list memory task and a serial reaction time task (SRTT) measuring motor sequence learning. The key manipulation was whether these two tasks shared the same ordinal structure or had different structures, and in which order participants completed them. The word list task involved learning a 12-word list through repeated presentation and recall. Words belong to 4 semantic categories: clothing, vegetable, transport, furniture, that map to different key press responses in the motor task. Participants completed 5 rounds of immediate recall and 1 delayed recall after 10 minutes. The motor task involved responding to visual cues by pressing corresponding buttons. Participants completed 3 practice blocks where they responded to both random sequences and repeating 12-item sequences. Motor skill was measured as the difference in reaction time between random and sequenced trials, larger differences indicating better learning. Key findings. Contrary to the original study's findings, the researchers found no evidence that sharing an ordinal structure facilitated learning in either direction. Word-to-motor transfer. Participants who learned the word list before the motor task showed no advantage when both sequences shared the same structure compared to when they differed. The motor skill scores were statistically indistinguishable between groups. Motor-to-word transfer. Similarly, participants who learned the motor sequence before the word list showed no improved recall when the structures matched versus when they differed. This was true for both immediate recall and delayed recall. Unexpected finding. The researchers did discover that the 2 different motor sequences used in the study varied in difficulty. with participants who learned sequence A performing better than those learning sequence B regardless of prior word list learning. This suggests that the motor sequences themselves were not equally challenging. Statistical analysis. The researchers used both traditional significance testing p-values, t-tests and Bayesian analysis BF10 values. Bayesian statistics provide a measure of evidence for or against an effect. In all comparisons, the evidence favored the null hypothesis no transfer effect over the alternative hypothesis transfer effects exist, with BF10 values ranging from 0.43 to 1.32. Values below 1 indicate evidence for the null hypothesis. Potential explanations for the discrepancy. The researchers considered several possible reasons why their results diverged from the original study. Different delay period activities. In the current study, participants completed a backward digit span task during the 10-minute delay before delayed recall. This standardized the delay period but might have affected memory consolidation processes. However, the delayed recall performance was comparable to the original study, suggesting this didn't interfere substantially. Motor sequence difficulty. The two motor sequences may have varied in difficulty, potentially obscuring transfer effects. Sequence A appeared easier to learn than sequence B, as evidenced by better performance when learned first without prior influence. Different participant populations or individual differences. The Australian sample might have differed from the original sample in ways that affected learning mechanisms. Participants might have used different cognitive strategies or engaged different neural pathways during learning. Different neural mechanisms. The serial reaction time task can engage multiple learning mechanisms, some involving the hippocampus and some involving other brain regions. Individual differences in which mechanisms participants relied on could affect whether cross-domain transfer occurs. Implications and conclusions. This study has significant implications for our understanding of memory systems. Questioning robustness. The failure to replicate suggests that cross-domain memory generalization is not a robust, reliable effect that can be consistently observed. This is important for scientific progress, as replication failures help refine theories and identify boundary conditions for effects. Complexity of memory interactions. The findings suggest that interactions between memory systems are more nuanced than previously thought. Simply sharing an abstract structure may not be sufficient to trigger generalization. Other factors such as task difficulty, individual differences, or subtle methodological variations likely play important roles. Need for further research. The researchers emphasize that more investigation is needed to understand when and why cross-memory interactions occur. Neuroimaging studies could help identify the neural mechanisms underlying these effects and whether they vary between individuals. Challenging assumptions. This study contributes to ongoing debates about whether strict divisions between memory systems are useful or whether more integrated frameworks are needed. The findings suggest that while overlap exists, cross-domain transfer may be more constrained than previously thought. Limitations. The researchers acknowledge that one limitation was the potential variation in difficulty between the two motor sequences, which may have influenced the expected transfer effects. Future work should aim to equate sequence difficulty more precisely. Additionally, the study did not include neuroimaging, so the neural mechanisms engaged during learning remain unknown. Conclusion. This replication study challenges the robustness of cross-domain generalization between motor and declarative memory sequences. Despite following the original methodology closely and having sufficient statistical power, the researchers found no evidence that sharing an ordinal structure facilitated learning across memory domains. These findings highlight the importance of replication in science and suggest that our understanding of how different memory systems interact may need to be refined. The results underscore that cross-memory interactions are complex and influenced by multiple factors beyond the shared structural features that previous research had identified.